Hi everyone, today we're installing the Perrin rear shift rod bushing, so for the BRZ, FRS or 86 or GT86. So why would you want to install this? Well, principally to get a better shift action in your gearbox. So I'll just show you, this is a printout of the workshop manual for these vehicles, and the bushing that we're replacing goes in there, so you can see the this is the floor shift control here. So we're replacing the bushing that goes in there with something that is a bit sturdier, so that will improve the shift action theoretically through the gearbox. So we'll see how it goes once it's installed. I've also got a white line positive shift kit in this car, as well as the MTech shift springs. So yeah, I'm aiming to get a better shift action right through the gearbox pretty much. So we'll see how that goes. Donut the cats here to keep us in line. So in terms of tools you're going to need, at the moment I've just got a 12mm and a 14mm socket and associated ratchets, and also a torque wrench and some blue Loctite. So blue Loctite's the stuff that you use if you need to disassemble something. It should break away with normal hand tools. Always a good idea to use that when you're reassembling. In the kit, you obviously get the bushing. They also give you some new hardware as well. So these actually have a 14mm head on them, same thread and pitch, but the ones you're taking out are 12mm, so that's why you need the 12 and the 14mm. I'll just confirm that. Yep, so no, I tell a lie. I'll find out what that is. Looks like a 13. Righto, so we'll have a look at that once we get into it. They also give you some lube, so that goes into the bushing just in there, and that keeps that rod just there lubricated. Torque wrench, so these are torque specifications here. So we've got Newton meters, and right at the end is foot-pounds. So we're interested in that value 13. So when we tighten these bolts back up to secure that bracket, we need to tilt those up to 13 foot-pounds. Also, and I'll show you this once we get into the car, we need to undo the center bearing shaft assembly for the drive shaft, so just so we can drop the drive shaft down a bit and get better access to those bolts that hold in the rear retainer and that sub-assembly for the floor shift controller, so that where the bushing is that we're going to replace. So these are 14mm bolts here, and they've given us the torque values here, so we're working in foot-pound, so 38, and we'll also use some Loctite on those as well. Okay, if there's any other tools that I use when we're going through this, I'll just describe those or put those in the description, or speak about those in the video after we've finished. So we've got the car up on the quick jack, so our locking arms are in place, and I've also put some jack stands underneath there. Also, always have 2 points of failure when you're lifting up a car, so if you're using a hydraulic jack, get some jack stands under there as well, and leave the jack under. Yeah, we're going to be working under the car, so we don't want this thing falling down on us and killing us. So okay, righto, we'll get into it. Okay, so we're under the car, so that's the front of the car there, and we wind our way back. That's the gearbox support there. So I've got the white line positive shift kit bushing in there that you can see. So that's the back of the gearbox, and then it goes into the drive shaft just there, past the exhaust system, and you can see just up in there That's the floor control shaft, or floor shift control shaft, just there. And you can just see that bit of grease on the end. That's where that shaft goes into the factory bushing. And that factory bushing that's in there, that's what we need to take out and replace it with a Perrin one to get a better shift action. So we'll be taking that bolt out there. That's a 12mm bolt. There's one on the other side, and we'll be replacing those with the Perrin hardware, and they're 13mm, the new ones that are going in. Back here, this is the center bearing carrier for the tail shaft. So we need to take that bolt out, and there's one over the other side. We'll remove that one as well. They're 14mm, so we just need to drop the tail shaft out fractionally, so we've got more room to work on to get that factory bushing out and replace it with the Perrin one. Okay, so we'll go ahead and loosen off this bearing carrier for the tail shaft, and then we'll get into removing those two 12mm bolts to get it that stock bushing. Okay, so I've got those two carrier bolts out. You can see there, and that drive shaft bearing assembly just falls away, so we can be able to maneuver that fairly easily, so we can get it. Those bolts just up in there. Sort of blocking the light a bit there, but anyway, so we'll go ahead and work on those and get those out. Those carrier bolts, pretty easy to get out, so no huge amount of force required to loosen those. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get those two bolts out of either side of that rear shifter carrier. Okay, so once those two bolts are loose, you're able to get those out by hand, or I was. So yeah, they're only done up to 18 or 13 foot-pounds, so there's not a lot of force required to break those. Pretty easy to get those out. So now this here is the bushing that we need to remove, so that's the stock one, so we'll get that out. Hopefully, anyway, I'll have a bit of a fiddle around with that and see if I can get that loose, and I'll show you how that comes away once I get it out. Okay, hopefully you can see that, but what I've done is that just pulls down that whole assembly there, and that should pull down enough, hence the requirement to lower the drive shaft. That should lower down enough for us to pull that off there, so I'll work away at getting that slid off there. It's coming loose there now, so I'll put the camera down and get that off, and I'll show you that stock bushing once I get it out. Okay, so that's the stock bushing there that we're replacing. So once I pulled that down, I just used both hands on either side of that bracket and pulled it towards the back of the car, and it just slid off that rod. So we'll get the new one, the Perrin one, greased up. We need to get some grease into that hole there using the grease that they've supplied, and that'll just slide on to that rod. And you need to have the Perrin logo pointing down towards the ground. So I'll get that done, and we should be able to slide that then onto the rod that is up there, and I'll just get some light on that so you can see it. Get the light around. Anyway, that's the rod just up there that we need to slide that new bushing on. Okay, we'll get that done. Okay, so I've got that Perrin bushing on. They mentioned that it is a tight fit and that you need to do a bit of wiggling around and apply a bit of force to get it on there. You do, not too much though, so yeah, just wiggle it around, manipulate it until you get it slid on there. Use plenty of grease and you should be right. So we can push that up now and get the 2 new bolts in supplied with the kit onto that bushing, and then we should be able to torque those to 13 foot-pound, and that should be that mount done. And then we can go ahead and re-secure the bearing carrier for the drive shaft, and once that's in we should be done. Okay, so those bolts are back in, so all I need to do now is to bolt back up the bearing carrier for the tail shaft, and that should be job done. Righto, thanks for watching.